Let's go, lesbians, let's go. Here we go, lesbians. Here we go, lesbians, come on. Oh, let's go, lesbians. Oh my God, lesbians.
The girls are out and we're ready to talk about girls. Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I will be giving you guys some Sapphic book recommendations. Since June is Pride Month, I decided to do a video dedicated to some female book recommendations. I have been reading a ton lately, so I have quite a few recommendations for you. Some of them are fairly well known, some of them are hopefully a bit new to you, but let's just get into it. The first one I have is The Dark Wife by S.E. Dimer. This one I mentioned in my mid-year freakout tag, so definitely go check that out if you have missed it. But this is a female Hades and Persephone retelling. And I know that a lot of you guys are always asking me for Hades and Persephone retellings, and before this book I really had no recommendations for you except for Lore Olympus, I suppose, but that is a webtoon, so I usually try not to recommend that one. But The Dark Wife is a beautifully written story, very reminiscent of Madeline Miller and her prose. I feel like S.E. Dimer does a really great job at emulating the Greek prose and the beautifully lyrical writing that entails. This is also own voices for the lesbian representation, so love that as well. And overall, I just really recommend this to people who do like that lyrical prose, do like Madeline Miller's writing, and do want a Hades and Persephone retelling. I believe it's pretty short as well. I think it's around 200 pages. It definitely doesn't have too much of a plot going on. It's very much centered around the atmosphere and the romance, but if that is something that you're interested in, highly recommend this one. The next three I have to recommend are all ones that I have read very recently. The first one being the Henna Wars by Adiba Jagadar. This is following our main character Nishat, and she has recently come out as a lesbian to her parents, and during the same time she is tasked with a business project in school, and she decides that she is going to create a henna business. But unfortunately, her crush, who is Flavia, who is a Brazilian girl, also decides that she wants to do a henna business as well. So Nishat is kind of dealing with these tumultuous feelings about having a crush on this girl, but also feeling hurt that Flavia is culturally appropriating her. And so this book definitely deals with a lot of discussions about sexuality, culture, growing up in a kind of conservative Irish town, coming to terms with your sexuality, discovering your values, a ton of things. It also deals with a really great sister relationship, so I highly recommend this one. I wasn't necessarily crazy about the romance in this book, but I do think it is still an important read because it kind of highlights the different hardships that queer people of color have to undergo that white queer people will never necessarily have to think about or go through. So definitely recommend this one. I also think that this was just really optimistic, but in a realistic way, and so it was heartwarming and also had that realism to it that I think a lot of readers are going to appreciate. The next one I have is The Midnight Lie by Marie Rakowski. I still don't know how to say her last name. I apologize. This one I am 100% recommending for the romance. If this was a fantasy recommendations video, this would not be on the list. But because it is a Sapphic book recommendation, absolutely, hands down, deserves to be here because the romance between Sid and the Reem is so filled with chemistry, and I love Sid so much. Sid has big strap energy. I say that all the time when referencing this book, but it's true. She has the charisma and the kind of bad boy trope that we see in a lot of hetero couples, and she just gave me everything that I wanted and more, and I loved their relationship. It's definitely a rockier relationship, definitely has its kind of complicated issues through the book, but I really enjoyed that kind of messy dynamic. I liked that it wasn't necessarily super clear cut as other romances are. Again, like I said, loved their chemistry, loved their growth. The story as a whole is a little messy, but again, if you go into this for the romance, you will not be disappointed. The next one I have is The Dark Tie by Elisa Jasinska. This is another YA fantasy, Sapphic YA fantasy, and it takes place in this island where the Witch Queen has to sacrifice the person that she loves in order to prevent the sea from flooding their island. And since the new Witch Queen has taken control, the sacrifices have not worked. And our main character, after kind of trying to capture the chosen sacrifice from the Witch Queen, ends up turning into the sacrifice herself, and we can imagine how the rest of the book goes. This is an incredibly atmospheric YA fantasy. Highly recommend for anybody who really loves that kind of writing style. The plot is messy, the pacing is a bit messy, but I also really loved the relationship between our two main characters. Eva, who is our Witch Queen, I related to her so much. She's definitely like a pessimist. She is very selfish in her own means and her own desires, and I loved the relationship between them because Lena is the complete opposite of her, so we get that kind of hard, soft couple pairing thing. I'm sure there's a better word for that, but I really enjoyed it. Their transition between kind of irritation, enemies, whatever, to lovers isn't very clear, but I loved it. I was screaming once they finally kissed, and it was a great time. Highly recommend to anybody who really likes an atmospheric fantasy read as well as a sapphic relationship. It was beautifully written and beautifully done. The next one I have is The Seep by Chana Porter. Now, this book is not necessarily one that I absolutely fell in love with, simply because it is way out of my comfort zone. But this is a novella following our main character, who is a trans woman who is dealing with her wife suddenly deciding that she wants to be turned back into a child and live life again. Because at the point of the story, aliens have kind of invaded Earth, and they're called the Seep, and they kind of feed on contentment, so there's no more responsibilities, there's no more hardships. All humans are kind of coasting right now, so our main character has to deal with the betrayal and kind of hurt of her wife, as well as these feelings of not being satisfied with the current state of the world. So it's not necessarily a romance, so this is kind of a tentative recommendation, but it still, of course, has that female-female aspect to it, and it shows kind of a different side to a sapphic relationship with like hurt and guilt and grief and things like that. So not necessarily lovey-dovey, but this book was so unique, and I would love to examine it in an academic setting because Chana Porter deals with so many themes and topics with this short novella that I think a lot of people would be interested in it and get something out of the book. So definitely do recommend this, even though it's not necessarily one that would come to mind during the Sapphic recommendation video. The next recommendation I have is anything by Katie O'Neill for anybody who really loves graphic novels. I know she is quite popular for her Tea Dragon Society, which I wouldn't say has an explicit female-female romance in it, but like, they definitely have a crush on each other, so that definitely counts. But one that I specifically would recommend is Princess Ever After. This is a really cute, really short graphic novel about a princess who rescues another princess from the tower. And I know that one of the princesses is plus size and the other one is black, so love that. And I can't exactly remember a lot of the themes that Katie O'Neill tackles in this story, but it was so cute. The art style is amazing. It gave me all of the feels, and I really appreciated it. So even though this was a shitty recommendation, I still recommend it because I just know that it made me super happy, and it made my bisexual ass smile throughout the whole reading process. The next recommendation I have is another kind of tentative one, and that is The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. This is following our two main characters who are sisters, and they are part of the Romani tribe, and they are captured and enslaved into this Eastern European lord's home, and so they deal with a ton of heavy hardships, and they have to go through a ton, but it does highlight the importance of sisterly dynamics, and one of our main characters characters does have a romance with another servant. So there is a female-female aspect to it, but it's definitely much more focused on the female relationship. And our two sisters are actually the first wives of Dracula. So there is a vampire aspect to this book, but it's definitely not the forefront of the story. So don't go into this expecting a whole lot of vampires, but that is a component of the story, so know that going in. But I really enjoyed this book as much as it was hard to read. The writing style was absolutely beautiful. It was so atmospheric, so beautifully written. The sisterly dynamic was done very well, and I definitely recommend this book. I know it's a bit hard to read, but I still think it's beautiful, and I think more people need to read it. The next one I have is For Dead Queens by Astrid Schultz. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this book multiple times, but this takes place in the kingdom of Kadara, and Kadara is split up into 4 quadrants. There is an agricultural quadrant, a technology quadrant, an arts quadrant, and a merchant quadrant, and each of the quadrants is ruled by one queen, and all of the 4 queens reside in the palace in the middle of the country. And we are following our main character Kiralee, as well as the perspective of the other 4 queens, as she discovers a plot to murder the 4 queens. And so she gets wrapped up into this plot, into this ploy, and there is a female-female romance between 2 of the queens. But again, it's definitely not a central part of the story, but it is there. This book is really interesting. It's action-packed, it's very entertaining. It definitely has a few flaws to it, but it's so fast-paced. I loved it. It was one of my favorite books of 2019, and not enough people have read this book. It is so fun, and there's so many components to it that I think a lot of people would really enjoy. So definitely pick this up if you have not already. It's really great. This next one is another tentative recommendation. I'm sorry I have a lot of tentative recommendations in this video, but even though the romance and stuff isn't at the forefront, I still want to recommend these books because they're still great. And one of those really great books is Darkwood by Gabby Hutchinson Crouch. This is a middle grade story. I pitch it as very Shrek-like. We are following our main character Gretel from Hansel and Gretel, as she is accused of witchcraft, and this country is kind of ruled by witch hunters, so witchcraft is heavily illegal. So Gretel is banished to the Darkwood, and she and all the other people in the village were taught that the Darkwood was a very scary place, somewhere where you could never venture to. But in reality, it is home to many other fairy tale creatures which we all know and love, and they actually protect the Darkwood. And it's not explicit, and it's not necessarily confirmed, at least in this first book. I do have the second book on my Kindle right now, but there are female-female vibes between 2 of the fairy tale characters in this book. So I still want to recommend this book. I know it's not explicit. I know a lot of people may not think it counts, but I still want to recommend this book because I loved it. It was so cute. It was so fun. It deals with a lot of themes about feminism in a really easy to understand way for kids, and I need more people to read this book because I love it so much, and I may be cheating by including it in this list just so I could talk about it, but I still did it, so fight me. The next one I want to recommend is The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. This takes place in the Library of Hell, where all of the unwritten books reside, and the librarian of this library has to take care of all of these books, and if the books are neglected, they can escape from the library. The characters from the books can escape and try to look for their authors in order to get their books finished. And our main character, Claire, who is the librarian, has to go and find one of these characters, but she also gets wrapped up in this plot to find the Devil's Bible. So there's a lot in this book. Claire is pansexual confirmed on the page, and she does have a female-female relationship, and we do meet that character in this book, but it was a past relationship. So it's kind of another one of those instances where it's not a focus on the relationship, more a different side of relationships. So it's kind of tying up loose ends. It's not second chance, but it's revisiting those past mistakes and what went wrong and things like that. And that definitely does take place in this book. So I do want to mention this as well, because, you know, maybe somebody wants sapphic representation, but they don't want like lovey-dovey, getting to know, falling in love kind of representation. Maybe they want kind of a bit messy. Maybe they want closure. Maybe they want something like that. So here you go. It's right here. Also, this is my favorite book of 2020 so far, so you should just read it just for that. So definitely recommend this one. And finally, my last recommendation is definitely one that I'm sure a lot of you guys will have known about, but Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. I did not think I was going to enjoy this book as much as I did. I heard so many times it be compared to Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I was like, listen, nothing's ever gonna top this. And although it doesn't top Red, White, and Royal Blue, it was still so incredibly cute and heartwarming. This is following our main character Millie, and she ends up getting accepted to this very prestigious Scottish school, and she ends up rooming with the Scottish princess, and it's kind of their enemies to lovers story. And this one really showed me the bisexual rep that I really appreciated and wanted, and I didn't know I needed, because Millie is going through bi panic through a half of the book, and I just really appreciated it a whole lot. It made me smile throughout the whole thing. It was so cute, so rom-com-y, so hallmarky. So if that's kind of the sapphic rep that you're looking for, this was so cute, and I highly recommend it. I know it's fairly hyped, but if you haven't read it, definitely check it out, because it's worth the hype. It's so cute. So those are all of my sapphic book recommendations. Let me know down below any and all of your sapphic recommendations so I can check them out myself. Would love to hear them, would love to see them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!